In a world where noise often speaks louder than truth, silence can become an undeniable force, a force that reflects an inner strength rooted in faith. In the midst of life's turmoil and chaos, the quiet, measured moments we choose to remain still are not signs of weakness but manifestations of the profound power that comes from a deep trust in God's divine plan. The quiet seconds we gift to those around us are not simply moments of passive observation, they are acts of deliberate faith. Like a mirror, our silence reflects the confusion and disorder of the world, while we remain untouched and untouchable, firm in the assurance that God is in control. As we stand still, we do not cower, we witness the unraveling of the false securities that others cling to, recognizing that only the unshakable foundation of Christ can withstand the tremors of life's challenges. Just as an earthquake shifts the earth beneath us, so too does our silence unsettle the world around us. There are those who attempt to fill the void with clamor, loud words, exaggerated gestures, and frantic motions designed to mask their vulnerabilities and insecurities. They may think that the more noise they make, the less room there will be for doubt. Yet we see through it all. In their haste to fill the silence, they only expose their own flaws and shortcomings. Our restraint, grounded in our trust in God, becomes our weapon, a weapon far sharper than any sword, more piercing than any argument. It is a weapon that does not fight for dominance, but simply refuses to engage with the empty distractions of the world. Our silence is not born of fear, but of faith. As the psalmist writes, "Be still, and know that I am God," Psalm 46 verse 10. In that stillness we find our strength, not because we have mastered the art of silence, but because we have surrendered our fears and anxieties to the one who holds all things together. The world tells us that power is found in noise, in the constant display of strength and control. Yet Christ, our ultimate model, showed us that true power is often found in restraint, in quiet submission to God's will. As he stood before Pilate, about to face the cross, he did not defend himself or shout out accusations. He remained silent, trusting in the Father's plan, even as the world around him swirled with confusion. His silence, like ours, was not weakness, it was the ultimate act of faith. "My kingdom is not of this world," John 18 verse 36, he declared. And just as his silence led to the fulfillment of God's grand purpose, so too can our silence become the backdrop against which God's will is revealed in our own lives. The world is filled with voices clamoring for attention, but these voices often conceal the deep insecurities that lie beneath. As we observe their struggles, their loud demands, and their desperate attempts to assert dominance, we see the truth: they are building their houses on sand. Their strategies, based on ego, manipulation, and deceit, are fragile. They may seem powerful for a time, but like all things that are not anchored in truth, they will eventually crumble. "The wise man built his house upon the rock," Jesus said, Matthew 7 verse 24. The storms may come, and the winds may blow, but the house built on the rock stands firm. In contrast, those who rely on the shifting sands of pride, fear, and deceit will find their foundations swept away. Our silence is not a passive retreat, it is an active refusal to engage in the world's games. We are not enticed by the world's illusions of power because we already know the truth. The truth is that no amount of noise, no amount of manipulation can alter the will of God. As Paul writes in Romans 8 verse 31, "If God is for us, who can be against us? Our faith is the foundation that supports us, even in the midst of chaos. When others try to manipulate us, when they attempt to drag us into their webs of lies and confusion, we do not take the bait. We stand firm, unshaken by their efforts, because we know that God's plan is already in motion. Their tactics, their deceptions, and their false securities hold no power over us. Indeed, silence often brings clarity. While the world is engulfed in confusion, we are able to see through the fog. The lies they speak only ensnare them further. As Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free," John 8 verse 32. When we trust in God's truth, we are liberated from the snares of manipulation. our clarity exposes their tactics, unraveling the falsehoods they weave. The harder they try to impose their will, the more they reveal their own instability. When their plans fail to break us, they find themselves trapped by their own deceit. They turn on one another, accusing each other, as the foundation of their alliances crumbles under the weight of guilt, shame, and fear. Without the external target of manipulation, their relationships dissolve, and they eat each other alive. This is the power of silence. It unmasks the weakness that masquerades as strength. The loudest voices, the most forceful displays of power, often come from the most fragile hearts. They may appear confident, even arrogant, but their confidence is built on shifting ground. It is a confidence that requires constant validation, constant attention, constant praise. The moment that external support is removed, their facade crumbles. In contrast, those who are grounded in faith, who trust not in their own strength, but in God's providence, remain unshaken. As Proverbs 3 verse 5-6 reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. We do not need to assert ourselves, because we know that God is our defender. Our faith and trust in him make us untouchable in the eyes of the world. We have already won, not because we engage in their battles, but because we rest in the victory that Christ has already secured for us. The irony is that, in the midst of our silence, we often become the center of attention. Those who once held sway over a room, who commanded the spotlight with their loud words and exaggerated actions, now find themselves orbiting around us. They may try to mimic our stillness, to replicate the peace that seems to radiate from within, but it is a peace they cannot replicate. It is a peace that comes only from the Holy Spirit, who lives within us. And so, they remain caught in their confusion, unable to understand how we remain untouched by their chaos. In the end, our silence is not a sign of surrender, it is a sign of surrender to God. It is a refusal to fight on the enemy's terms, and instead to trust in God's timing and his perfect plan. In this silence we stand firm, unmoved, unshaken. As Isaiah 40 verse 31 declares, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength, they shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." We wait on God, and in that waiting we find our strength. The world may scramble around us, but we remain anchored in his love, his truth, and his sovereignty. And in this stillness we have already won the victory. Let us not be swayed by the noise of the world. Let us find strength in our silence, in our trust in God's plan. For in that silence we become untouchable, unshakable, and completely in control through the power of Christ within us. Betrayal doesn't just reveal others, it reveals you. It forces you to confront the hidden parts of yourself that you might have ignored or never fully understood. It forces you to face the places within where deceit took root, and how those seeds were allowed to grow. In that painful moment of exposure, you are stripped of your naivety, your innocence, and you are left with only your truest, most authentic self. What once seemed like betrayal now becomes the most profound catalyst for personal transformation. The ones who betray you think they've won, but all they've truly done is accelerate your growth in ways they never anticipated. Their actions gift you clarity of who they truly are and who you are without their influence. Betrayal is often painted as a loss, but it is a victory in disguise. They fail to realize that by showing their true colors, they have only shown their limitations, their weakness, their inability to stand in the light of truth. And when the dust settles, you are the one who emerges unbroken, stronger, and more whole than ever before. The pain of betrayal is temporary, but the power it unlocks in you is eternal. In the immediate aftermath, the pain feels all-encompassing, deep, raw, and almost unbearable. But with time, you will realize that this pain was only the necessary fire that forged a stronger version of yourself. It sharpens your instincts, strengthens your resolve, and cements your sense of self in a way that no experience before ever could. Betrayal doesn't mark the end, it marks a powerful beginning. It's not a setback, it's a revelation that shatters illusions and opens the door to a life where you are no longer bound by the fear of others or by false expectations. I didn't just survive betrayal, I rose from it, stronger, clearer, and more rooted in my purpose than ever. And you will too. Because betrayal doesn't break the strong, it builds them. The very things that were designed to destroy you will only reveal the unshakable foundation you were always meant to stand upon. Your presence alone shatters what they worked so hard to build, this fortress of lies they tried to construct. You carry an energy they cannot replicate. You carry a truth they cannot withstand. Your light, your authenticity, will expose everything they've been hiding in the shadows, forcing them to face what they have long tried to avoid. They aren't just threatened by you, they are terrified of you. Because authenticity is far brighter than any mask they could ever create, and you don't need tricks or deceit to shine. You are raw, unfiltered truth, and that is a force they'll never understand or know how to match. In group dynamics, their power only exists as long as their lies remain intact. When you come into their world unshaken by their noise, immune to their manipulation, and unwilling to participate in their games, the cracks begin to show. At first it's subtle, it's just a glance, a flicker of doubt in their eyes. But soon the cracks widen, and they can no longer pretend. They can no longer keep up the facade. They begin to turn on each other, desperate to save their own image, each of them blaming the other. They will tear each other apart in a bid to protect their own fragile ego. They've spent so much time perfecting their masks, they've forgotten how to face the truth. And when someone like you enters their orbit, someone who isn't fazed by their tactics, someone who doesn't need to stoop to their level to prove their worth, that is when their walls begin to crumble. You are the one variable they couldn't account for, the calm in the storm that shatters their illusions. They were never prepared for someone like you, and because of that, they can't recover. Their power was built on lies, and now those lies are crumbling. Betrayal isn't your downfall. It's the fire that forges you. When their mask slips, it isn't an accident or a mistake. It's the inevitable result of their falsehoods and deceit catching up with them. What you once saw as betrayal is not an end, but the universe's way of unveiling truth from the layers of lies. It's an act of divine intervention, stripping away what no longer serves you, severing ties that were never meant to hold you. It is brutal, yes, but necessary. This betrayal exposes who was never meant to stand beside you, revealing the people who were always going to leave once the truth came to light. The moment they act against you, they actually free you. And that is the great irony they'll never understand. They think they've hurt you, but in reality, they've set you free to soar higher than you ever could have before. I faced betrayal that didn't just sting, it burned. This wasn't a soft disappointment or a quiet hurt. No, this was a violent tearing of the veil, the very fabric of trust and belief that I had once placed in the wrong people. It wasn't subtle, it was a shock to my system. It left me raw and exposed, questioning everything I thought I knew. And yet it was in that agony that I found a truth that was sharper and more powerful than the pain itself. Their actions didn't destroy me, they dismantled the parts of myself that were weak and clinging to false ideas. They forced me to face what I had been holding on to and let it go. And in the place of that pain, I found something far stronger, a version of myself I never knew existed. And now, if this is hitting home for you, I want you to comment below. Betrayal made me unstoppable. Let's stand together. Let the world see that we are alive, we are stronger than ever, and we are unstoppable. If you feel moved to do so, feel free to hit subscribe to Obsidian and activate the notification bell so that you continue receiving these vital spiritual light codes, messages that will continue to guide you toward your highest potential. They try to fight you with weapons forged in deceit, but those weapons shatter before they ever touch you. Their words, their lies, their false accusations, these are the weapons they use to try to tear you down. But no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Those weapons have no power over you. The more they try to undermine you, the stronger you become. Every lie they spread about you only circles back to them. unraveling their own web of deceit, while your name remains untouched. They believed they could dim your light, silence your truth, but all they did was make your light shine brighter. You are divinely protected in ways they can never understand, because they don't have access to the protection that surrounds you. Their attempts to harm you only serve to make you more powerful. They don't know that the more they try to break you, the more they are merely forging a path for you to become the fullest expression of yourself. I've stood in places where silence became my greatest shield. The world around me erupted with noise, with anger, accusations, and attempts to force me into defense. But I remained unmoved, resolute in my stillness. I let them pour their venom, let them reveal every card they thought would break me. Every word, every gesture, every attempt to provoke a reaction, nothing could shake my foundation. I didn't respond, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing even the slightest crack in my armor. I knew then, as I know now, that my silence was far more powerful than any spoken word. And when they were spent, when their fury faded and their words lost their sting, I was still standing, not because I was afraid to speak, but because I understood my voice wasn't needed to win. The battle had already been won within. When you choose not to react, you strip them of their power. Their strength lies in dragging you into their chaos, in seeing you flinch, in baiting you into a fight that serves only their terms. But your quiet is deafening. It forces them to confront their own instability, their own desperate need for control. They expect noise. They expect confrontation. They expect a battle where they can measure their victory. What they don't expect is stillness, and that stillness is the weapon that destroys them. It's a force they can't fight, a presence they can't understand, and it leaves them powerless in the face of your calm. Silence isn't weakness, it's far sharper than any word they could throw at you. Your choice to stay silent doesn't mean you're avoiding the fight, it means you've already won it. While they scramble to expose their hand, to drag you into their world of distraction and turmoil, you remain steady, calculating, watching every word they spill in frustration, every move they make in desperation. It's not passive, it's strategic. Every wasted attempt they make is ammunition you can use. Silence isn't surrender, it's surveillance. It's an active choice to conserve your energy, to hold your ground until the moment comes where your stillness can speak louder than any reaction ever could. Their fear isn't rooted in what you've done to them, it's born from who you are. They see in you what they lack: courage, authenticity, and a deep connection to something greater than themselves. It's not your actions that threaten them, it's your very existence. They fear the strength you draw from within, the conviction that guides your every step. They fear the way you disrupt their carefully constructed world simply by being yourself. They may try to diminish you, to break you, but every attack they launch only exposes their own weaknesses. You don't need to retaliate because your mere presence is the response. You disrupt their darkness, not through force, but by shining a light that they can't touch. You don't play by their rules, and that's why they don't know how to fight you. They can't control you, and that makes them feel helpless. Let them flail and fail, it's all part of the plan. You were chosen to disrupt, to shine, to bring truth to places where lies have ruled for far too long. To the source that fuels you, I've walked this path. I've stood in rooms where my very presence made them squirm, their discomfort palpable as they scrambled to maintain control. They thought their words, their plans, their strategies could break me, but they were wrong. Every attempt they made to diminish me, every scheme they tried to use to bend me to their will, was met with a force they couldn't explain. It wasn't anger, it wasn't vengeance, it was certainty. I knew exactly who I was, and no amount of plotting or manipulation could change that. I didn't need to fight them. The universe had already taken care of it. It was never my battle to win, it was simply a matter of standing firm and trusting that I would emerge victorious, not because of my efforts, but because of my unwavering belief in myself. Their fear isn't your burden, it's your confirmation. The fear they project onto you is the very thing that affirms you're exactly where you're meant to be. Nothing they do can change your path, your purpose, or your destiny. And now, let us take a moment to honor those who are chosen to walk this difficult road, the ones who see the world differently, the silent guardians, the watchful souls who are always awake, always vigilant. They don't fit the mold, and they wouldn't have it any other way. While others walk familiar paths, they forge their own, fighting battles that remain unseen, illuminating shadows where others would rather turn a blind eye. This journey isn't for everyone, and that's perfectly fine. But if you feel it deep within, if you understand the call of something greater, you'll know this path was meant for you. No masks, no pretenses, just raw, unapologetic truth. The Obsidian Inner Order is here a sanctuary where kindred spirits gather to share wisdom, to connect, to transform. Over 400 strong, united not by conformity, but by purpose. If you're ready to join us, to step into a space where authenticity and strength are celebrated, you know where to find us. The link is in the description. If not, that's perfectly fine too, because we are always here watching over, making a difference in ways that go unseen, but always present. Here's to those who walk their own path, not for recognition, but because it's simply who they are. Here's to you. By silence, betrayal, and divine purpose, a Christian perspective on life's trials. In the midst of life's trials, silence is often misinterpreted as a sign of weakness or passivity. Yet when viewed through the lens of Christian faith, silence is not about withdrawing from the world, but about aligning oneself with God's greater plan. It's about waiting for His timing and knowing that He is in control, even in the most challenging situations. Silence in this context is an active surrender, a quiet strength that allows us to trust that God will act when the time is right. As the psalmist says, "Be still, and know that I am God," Psalm 46 verse 10. It is in this stillness that we find clarity, not by responding to every provocation or engaging in every battle, but by resting in the truth that God is orchestrating all things for our good, Romans 8 verse 28. In life, not every conflict demands a reaction, and not every injustice requires immediate defense. The wisdom of silence teaches us that we are not called to fight every battle, but to trust in God's sovereignty over every circumstance. Jesus, who endured the ultimate betrayal and suffering, exemplified this passive strength. When he was wrongfully accused and crucified, he did not open his mouth in defense, for he knew that his Father's will was being fulfilled. As Isaiah 53 verse 7 states, he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. In silence, we often find that the actions of others, no matter how provocative, reveal more about their character than ours. Those who seek to disrupt our peace or provoke us may unwittingly expose their own insecurities. As Christians, we are called to a higher purpose, and it is through our restraint and patience that we witness God's power at work within us. Proverbs 15 verse 1 reminds us, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Our silence, therefore, is not an escape but a deliberate decision to trust that God will handle what we cannot control. The chaos of the world can sometimes overwhelm us, but our faith reminds us that this chaos does not define us. While others may be consumed by their anger or frustrations, we can remain steady, knowing that God's peace transcends understanding, Philippians 4 verse 7. Our silence is not born from fear or submission, but from the certainty that God will reveal the truth in His perfect timing. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 10 verse 13, "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful, He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear." In times of trial, we can trust that God is with us, strengthening us even when we remain quiet, waiting for His plan to unfold. Betrayal, a divine redirection. Betrayal is perhaps one of the most painful experiences a person can endure. It wounds the heart and shakes one's trust in others. But from a Christian perspective, betrayal is not a curse or a sign of failure. It is a powerful tool used by God to redirect our lives toward His greater purpose. Not every relationship, connection, or friendship is meant to last. Some people come into our lives for a season, not as companions but as teachers. Their betrayal is a divine moment of clarity that removes the distractions and false securities from our lives, making space for what God truly intends for us. When Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and cast into prison, it seemed as though his life had been ruined. But what appeared to be a tragic end was, in reality, the beginning of God's greater plan for his life. As Genesis 50 verse 20 says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done." The saving of many lives, Joseph's betrayal, did not derail his destiny. It was the very thing that positioned him for the purpose God had for him. This narrative is a reminder that even when others act against us, God is still working behind the scenes, using their actions to propel us toward our divine purpose. Betrayal, in this sense, becomes a catalyst for spiritual growth. It forces us to confront the truth about ourselves, our relationships, and our dependence on God. Jesus himself was betrayed by one of his closest disciples, Judas, and yet his suffering on the cross was the very means by which our salvation was secured. In betrayal, we witness God's redemptive power at work. Romans 8 verse 28 assures us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." When we are betrayed, it may feel as though everything we've built has been destroyed. But in reality, betrayal often exposes what is not meant for us, things that might hinder our growth or distract us from our true calling. It is through betrayal that God removes unnecessary obstacles and clears the path for us to pursue his will more fully. Psalm 55 verse 22 encourages us, "Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken." Betrayal, then, is not an end but a redirection towards something greater. Trusting God's timing. The timing of betrayal is rarely convenient or fair. It often occurs when we least expect it, during seasons of vulnerability, or when we are already facing other trials. But from a Christian perspective, betrayal aligns perfectly with God's timing, his perfect and divine timing. The Bible teaches us that God's ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are higher than ours, Isaiah 55 verse 8 to 9. What may seem like an interruption or a setback is, in reality, a part of God's sovereign plan. Just as Jesus' crucifixion appeared to be a tragic and unjust event, it was, in fact, the pivotal moment in history when salvation was made available to all. The betrayal of Judas, the rejection by the people, and the agony of the cross were all necessary steps in fulfilling God's plan of redemption. In the same way, our own betrayals serve as necessary steps in the unfolding of our purpose. They remove what is hindering us, even when we don't realize it. The Apostle Paul, who endured multiple betrayals and hardships, writes in Romans 5 verse 3 to 4, "We also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character, hope." God does not waste any experience, no matter how painful. Every betrayal, every trial, and every moment of suffering is a tool that God uses to shape us into the people he has called us to be. As we endure, we grow in strength, in faith, and in trust in God's ultimate plan. Betrayal may feel like a disruption, but it is often the very thing that accelerates our growth and brings us closer to God's purpose for our lives. Embracing the power of God's plan. Through silence, we learn to trust in God's sovereignty. Through betrayal, we gain clarity and strength, knowing that God is using every situation to refine us and direct us toward his divine plan. While the world may see our silence as weakness and our betrayals as failures, we know that they are not the end of our story, but the beginning of something greater. God is always at work, turning what others meant for harm into a catalyst for our spiritual growth and transformation. As we face life's challenges, we must remember that we are not alone. God is with us in every moment, guiding us, strengthening us, and helping us navigate the trials we encounter. We do not need to fight every battle or react to every betrayal. Instead, we can rest in the assurance that God is in control and his plan for our lives is good. As Proverbs 3 verse 5 to 6 reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Through silence, through betrayal, and through every trial, we are being shaped into the people God created us to be. Our journey is not defined by the actions of others, but by God's faithful, unshakable plan for our lives. In the end, we are not defined by our pain, our struggles, or the betrayals we face. We are defined by the God who walks with us, who refines us, and who calls us to trust in his perfect timing and plan. The power of faith in times of chaos, a Christian perspective. In moments of hardship, when the chaos of life seems overwhelming and relentless, we are faced with a choice to be consumed by it or to let it forge us into something stronger. As Christians, we are called to see every challenge, every obstacle, and every trial not as a burden, but as an opportunity for growth, refinement, and transformation. Just as gold is purified in the fire, so too are we molded and strengthened by the adversities we face, provided we place our trust in God's divine plan. When the storms of life rise up against us, be it through betrayal, insult, or even the whispers of those who seek to undermine us, there is a tendency to respond in kind, to fight back on their level, to descend into the chaos with them. But this is not the way of the believer. Our strength lies in our ability to rise above the fray, to refuse to be drawn into the turmoil. In the words of the Apostle Paul, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans 12 verse 21. Our reaction to the chaos should not be one of retaliation, but of resilience, a commitment to remain grounded in our faith and to move forward in the purpose God has set before us. The challenge, then, is to recognize that every act of negativity, every insult or betrayal, is not merely an attack, but a raw material, a catalyst for growth. As Christians, we believe that God is sovereign over all things, and even in our darkest moments, he is at work behind the scenes, orchestrating everything for our good. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Romans 8 verse 28. This means that no matter how dark the storm may appear, it is never without purpose. Every effort to bring us down can be used by God to lift us up, to teach us perseverance, and to refine our character. We are not called to be passive victims of circumstance, but active participants in God's plan for our lives. When we refuse to engage in the chaos, we are not surrendering, we are preparing. We are positioning ourselves for a divine breakthrough. In moments of silence, when we choose not to retaliate or be consumed by the noise around us, we are giving God the space to work. Psalm 46 verse 10 reminds us, be still, and know that I am God. In stillness we find clarity. In stillness we give room for God's voice to speak louder than the noise of our circumstances. This is the power that resides within us. We have been equipped by God with the strength to endure, the wisdom to discern, and the patience to wait. When others seek to bring us down, we can choose to rise, for we know that God is with us. The chaos they create may seem formidable, but it is no match for the power of God's presence in our lives. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life, of whom shall I be afraid? Psalm 27 verse 1. Our confidence is not in ourselves, but in the one who fights for us. As we face the storms of life, we must remember that our response is not just about resisting the negative forces around us, it is about channeling that resistance into something greater. We are called to create, to build, to rise above the turmoil and produce something of eternal value. Every moment of suffering, every moment of struggle can be transformed into an opportunity for growth, not just for ourselves but for others. Jesus himself said, in this world you will have trouble. But take heart. I have overcome the world, John 16 verse 33. His victory over sin and death empowers us to overcome the challenges we face, not in our own strength, but in his. The key to overcoming the chaos is not to fight it with more chaos, but to transcend it through faith. We must trust that God's plan is always better than our own. When we experience moments of alignment, those times when everything seems to fall into place, when we see a clear path forward that is not chance, it is God's hand at work in our lives, reminding us that we are exactly where we are meant to be. Jesus assures us in Matthew 7 verse 7, "Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you." These moments of clarity are His way of guiding us, reaffirming that we are not walking this path alone. The battles we face are not fought in isolation. While others may try to conspire against us, we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, angels, saints, and the very Spirit of God who are working on our behalf. Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Hebrews 1 verse 14. These unseen forces are constantly working to protect us, to dismantle the schemes of the enemy before they can harm us. We may not always see it, but we can rest assured that God is always at work, weaving our victory out of what appears to be defeat. In moments of trial, we must remember that every weapon formed against us will not prosper. Isaiah 54 verse 17 says, "No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you." The attacks we face are not designed to destroy us, but to build us up, to refine our character and strengthen our faith. We may not always understand why certain things happen, but we can trust that God's hand is always upon us, guiding us through. The war we are fighting is not just a physical one, it is spiritual. Ephesians 6 verse 12 reminds us, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." Our greatest battles are fought in prayer, in the quiet moments when we place our trust in God's power, and in the confidence that He will never leave us or forsake us. Deuteronomy 31 verse 6. In the end, the chaos that others try to inflict upon us is nothing more than a temporary distraction. What we build from it through faith, resilience, and the power of God's grace will last. As we rise above the storm, we become living testimonies of God's power, His faithfulness, and His unshakable love. When we choose to create, to build, and to rise above the noise, we are reflecting the image of Christ, who overcame the world, and we are becoming everything God has destined us to be. So when chaos comes your way, do not fear. Do not let it consume you. Let it be the fire that forges you. And know that you are not alone. You are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, and the God who called you is faithful to complete the work He has begun in you. Trust in His plan, and rise.